Bernstein again. Big opening. Pass 5. Pass 10. Vermont's a man. And he goes all the way to the 15-yard line. 17 yards of the terror.
Welcome back to Believe in Badgers on the Believe Network, presented by betonline.ag and Oak Bridge Wealth Management. I'm Matt Perkins, joined, as always, by Badger legend, the Hebrew Hammer himself, Matt Bernstein. Bernie, how are we doing today, bud?
Every day on the podcast is a holiday, but I think we're here with someone who pretty much made the Hammer who he is. This guy cut the wood, cut the stone, like hammered the iron. This guy definitely made me into the person and I think the football player I was today. Although I'm still scared of John Dettmann today. I'll still call him JD, but JD, thank you so much for coming on the podcast and talking about your time at UW.
Thanks for having me. No, it's great. And the Hebrew Hammer, I've not heard that for a long time. And I have to say, that's got to be in my top 10. That night has to be in my top 10.
I mean, I've said it.
The whole story from beginning to end.
I've said it before. That's the game that made me like a Badger fanatic. So I have Bernie to thank for that one from my freshman year. So before we get into it with Coach Dettmann, want to remind everyone tuning in that we are presented by betonline.ag, where they continue to be your number one source for all of your online sports wagering needs. You name it, they've got it over there at BetOnline. Head on over to the website or use your mobile device to sign up today and receive a 50% welcome bonus on your first deposit with our promo code BELIEVE. That's BLEAV, BetOnline, where the game starts. And if you are a current or future professional athlete, link up with our guy, Chris Anicetti, over at Oak Bridge Wealth Management. That's Oakbridge_Anicetti, ANICETE. Always, your money's always right because you're always on time. And I think that is in large part due to our current guest.
Not in large part, in total part. This guy. I sleep in rooms only because they're with clocks, and there needs to be a clock everywhere because John Dettmann inceptioned my brain to never be late. And I actually think it's a really good thing. I'm not making fun, but it's still like that inner, like you can't, like I have dreams of waking up and being late. I don't have dreams about anything else. So JD, thank you for that.
Thanks for the terror. Yeah, no, you know what? It was a simple thing that I think made a big difference. And it's the accountability for everyone. When you make it that rule for one person or two people or five people, that's different. When the rule applies to everyone, I think it mattered. There's a team element to that. It seemed a little extreme at the time, but you know what? We won a lot of football games. So we at least showed up on time for the games.
We showed up way too early for a lot of those games.
Yeah, there you go.
So JD, let's go back to the beginning, because you were a star athlete playing football in Wisconsin. So what was that like? What was your journey like? You had I think you had a tryout, or you were on the Packers in the early 80s.
I had tried out with a couple teams, ended up in Green Bay. It was the strike year. So I was on the team, we were there, and then we went on strike, and there was a handful of us that got released, but I got hurt. I was on IR. So it was kind of one of those notorious knee injury things. So having been in that environment, I would say it gave me an appreciation for what my career ended up being. I mean, I knew what high calves and narrow ankles meant standing behind James Lofton in the receiver line. But I saw that repeat itself again. That was Chris Chambers. Chris Chambers had that same lower leg, and they both ran like a deer and jumped, out of the gym. But that was a genetic trait. So even those experiences, although I weren't fruitful, I didn't play. I didn't actually have an NFL career. I learned an awful lot being there. And I knew what it was to see what great players were. That Packers run in the playoffs that year. I mean, that's 1982. So that'll throw a number on you.
It was the year I was born.
Yeah, there you go.
Pretty crazy. Wait, so JD, so then what was the transition from being a player to wanting to coach, and then eventually, how did you get from that point in 1982 to 1990 becoming the head of strength and conditioning?
I was always in the fitness business. I was an exercise science major. Went into the YMCA initially after the Packer experience, had a corporate experience. I don't know if people know this, the Enron company. I was the corporate fitness director at Enron. So if anybody does the Google search on Enron, the failed oil company, I was just there, actually in front of the building here a few months ago, because I went down to the national championship game because Ben Herbert, former Badger, was coaching in it. So I got a chance to go with him and went over to the building and actually knocked on the window. But yeah, when Enron was formed, I was one of their first employees and I ran a corporate fitness facility for them. So then I ended up going from there to Florida in the YMCA, still in that that same cycle, and went to Wisconsin because it was a big chance. I took a big risk, quit my job, moved to Madison, threw everything out, started over. And so the career-wise, I was 6 years into the Y. All of a sudden, I just said, all right, I'm out. Here I come. Let's go do this. And then I was there almost 30 years. So I guess I made the right decision anyway.
Hold on. I need to drill down on Enron for a second.
Okay. Yeah.
Okay. Enron, you joined Enron in when like the late 80s?
I was the physical director at the downtown YMCA in Houston, Texas.
Yep.
Enron was across the street.
Yep.
Ken Lay was the CEO of Enron, now deceased. He was best friends with the CEO of the YMCA of the Metropolitan Houston Y. There was 30 YMCAs in Houston, so it's a big city. But he was best friends with the guy who ran the whole show. He was going to form Enron. He hadn't done it yet. It was known as the guppy that swallowed the whale. It was Northern Natural Gas, Omaha Natural Gas. There's all these companies. He was going to come in and form this company. Well, I was pulled aside by my boss saying, hey, Ken wants to do this. He wants to build a fitness facility. He wants it to be top notch. He goes, and I want you to do it. So I was the Y employee. I never worked for Enron. I was a consultant from the Y loaned to Enron, which I'm grateful for because I lost no money. And I still have my YMCA retirement because I was vested before I left. But
they must have been a pretty early corporation to have like a corporate fitness director, right? That's not something you really found in the 80s. It feels like something you don't find to like the 2020s, 2010s.
In the oil companies in Houston, it was big. Tenneco had one. Yeah. Golf had one. And downtown Houston was a hub for that. And one of the companies that Ken Lay took over was Omaha Natural Gas, and they had a fitness center.
Interesting.
So you want to talk about an uncomfortable trip? You know what they had me do? Fly there on their Learjet, which I've never done before, but that was a trip. And then go talk to the guy who's running it. I remember his name to this day, Dr. Roy Hunter. He was a doctor, African-American gentleman. And I remember speaking to him because I was there to cherry pick his stuff. What a mission. How do you handle that? You walk in and say, hey, by the way, we're closing your place and you don't have a job anymore and the company's gone. But do you have anything here I could use? That's what they sent me there for. And I decided that we just leave it all in. We start over. So anyway.
Okay. Thank you for letting me take that little diversion there, Bernie. I can go history and like that kind of stuff all day, but we're here to talk about strength and football.
Okay. Wait, JD, what was the penalty for an Enron employee being late?
Hey, trust me, at that place, oh God, it was amazing. You know what? We had the best program in America at the time. We were literally, our numbers, we had a tracking system and we would track everybody. We were blowing the doors off. We had a lot of people going through that place. So we didn't have to punish anybody. People wanted to be there. They're excited.
They're excited. I love that. So what was the interview process like in 1990? Like, who did you meet with? You just said you threw everything out, but like, what does that look like?
It's way different than that. So I'm working at the Y, right? I am now leaving Enron. and I'm going to be an executive director at the Fort Lauderdale, Florida, downtown Y. I get the job, and I'm not technically qualified for it. So I have to go to this training I'm the youngest executive in the country. I'm like 27 years old. But they're saying, oh, by the way, you got to go get this training because we're supposed to not hire you unless you have this. I fly to George Williams College, which is in Lake Geneva, Wisconsin, in October. I did it on purpose. I had to go to this convention. They had it. The training was there. Also was Packer game. They were playing the Cowboys that weekend. So I said, what the hell? I'll go up there. That'll be a great time. Whatever. Why I'll pay for it. It's cool. I go in there. I meet another guy who played high school football for Barry, was a strength coach at Notre Dame with Lou. And I came to Wisconsin as the assistant with him. So, but what ended up happening, I mean, we clicked. We both played. He played at Nebraska with that great team with Mike Rozier and Dave Remington and all those guys. He was an offensive lineman there. Long story short, he says to me while we're there, hey, if Notre Dame plays in the Orange Bowl this year, I'll come down and see you. And I said, cool, blew it off. This is October. Well, Notre Dame's in the Orange Bowl. Barry Alvarez got the Wisconsin football job that morning. He's on the Notre Dame staff. Okay. He's going to coach this game and he's leaving. This guy played high school football for Barry, went to Nebraska basically because Barry played at Nebraska. So true story. We go to the game, have a hell of a time. We're sideline passes. They win the game. We're out. It's a good night. Next day, he's talking to Barry Alvarez. Barry wants him to come to Wisconsin to be the strength coach because he was at Notre Dame with Lou and that group. He puts the phone down, looks at me, goes, I'll go if you go. I'm the executive director of the Y in Fort Lauderdale. I have it in my contract. I got to give a 30-day notice to leave. That's part of my deal. I run the place. So we're sitting there. I said, all right. 12-pack later, we're still sitting there going, all right, screw it. I'm coming. Screw it. So I left everything in Fort Lauderdale, my vehicle, everything, jumped on an airplane. I had a metropolitan board meeting the next morning. So the way the Y works is there's branches, and then there's a governing body that governs the branches. That's called the Metropolitan Board. There was a meeting the next day. I'm on the agenda. It's at 9 a.m. I've made a decision. I'm leaving. I got a 30-day notice in my contract, and I'm hungover. So now I'm walking this meeting in downtown Fort Lauderdale. I'll never forget it. There's a guy, he was the CEO of Westinghouse. His name was Warner Bratz. He hated the downtown Y. He thought the Y was supposed to be out kids and, after school and all that. He didn't like fitness centers. He thought that was a waste of money for the Y. He wanted it closed. That morning, he sees me in the parking lot. I had a $5 bill in my hand. I gave it to a homeless guy. They were all over in downtown Fort Lauderdale. He watches me do it. Gets in the meeting. He's the chairman of the board. He starts talking about this, about how he maybe had misjudged me because I was more a fitness guy and I didn't care about all the kids and nothing else. And he blows all this smoke in this meeting. I'm going to get up and resign in 5 minutes. So now I'm sweating. I'm sweat running down. I'm going, oh my God, this guy likes me now. I was looking forward to this. So anyway, I resigned right there, stood up in that meeting, said, guys, it's been too hard on me. The stress is too much. Boom, boom, boom. I went home. I was on an airplane. In 2 hours, we went to South Bend first because that was where the strength program that he knew the most about was still there because Jerry Schmidt was still there. Jerry's now at Oklahoma. He's still in that. And so we went there, grabbed all the program stuff we could get and drove to Madison. It was over right there. YMCA career ended immediately.
That is a whirlwind and a half.
Crazy. And I was the executive. So went from being the boss. I'm the assistant now. And really, at that time, there really wasn't a lot of resources. So assistant in college strength and conditioning then did a lot of stuff. I was the men's basketball guy. I was a women's basketball guy. We had baseball. That's another trivia question. I was the baseball strength coach when they dropped baseball at Wisconsin. But so I had a bunch of sports. So it's not like you were just trained in one team. So, but anyway.
And JD, you showed up. I mean, 1990 was not a great time to be a Wisconsin football player. So what? And you're not a loser. You are a winner, big time. So what was that like? The transition to the gearing dudes up, the getting the guys in the weight room. Like when you showed up, who was there? And you're like, what can I do with these guys?
You know what's. I think I gained a real appreciation for not only the coaches, but team, the concept of team. I think if you really looked at some of those teams, they were loaded with players. I mean, I think about even that first team. God, Donnie Davy was on that team. Melvin Hunter was on that team. Lamar White was on it. Raphael Robinson was on that team. I mean, these guys played in the NFL, and they win one football game. You know, I mean, so it's not like they were bad players. They just didn't have the collective good, that piece that we all call chemistry or teamwork or whatever it is. Individually, they were good players here. So it's not about getting them to become better players. It was about getting them to understand that you had to do it together, right? It wasn't an independent thing. I think there's anything that I truly appreciate now, it's what a locker room is. Because the locker room's where it all happens. Everything in the locker room, there's either respect there's either, a pecking order, there's leadership in there. You see all kinds of things show up in the locker room. And I think that team had no semblance of that. None. Everybody walking in a different direction, different beat to a different drum. But players, a ton of them.
So do you think that the strength and conditioning component creates that culture and that team?
Absolutely. It certainly could. The collective effort thing, I think there's benefit in not only rite of passage, but doing something together. Difficult. We used to use the rite of passage was our upper deck, stadium stairs. You showed up in the summer, you're going up there, you're going to be scared to death. We won't leave you out. Well, we might leave a couple of you up there, but we're going to bring most of you back down. But in the end, those things carry over everywhere in life where you're counting on other folks and they're not letting each other down. And we always emphasize, make sure you bring your teammate back with you. Don't leave people behind, because we knew there was going to be guys that were going to struggle. And struggle was the simple part of it. It's what they did with the struggle that mattered. Did they manage the struggle? Did they manage each other during the struggle? Because ultimately, if you can't do that in that setting, you certainly can't do it in the game when it really matters.
Dude, when did you start the stadium, the upper decks?
Oh, God. I didn't think about this. Probably.
So for anyone who doesn't, I'm just going to say, for anyone who doesn't understand, if you ever go to Camp Randall and look at the upper deck, we used to run up the hardest, the longest path you could do. First off, we jog up, which I thought was the hardest part. And then you'd sprint up the top, jog across. And by the time you got down, the JD would blow his whistle and you're basically going up, and we do between 6 to 12, depending on the summer and how it was going. And JD, how you felt about how hard people were working. One of my favorite stories is we would start 2 up because you couldn't really go all the way down. And you're like, all right, 45-second break in between, not a minute, because you guys are cheating. And we're like, we're stepping 1 up here. It's just 1 stair up.
Hey, you know what? I know this. That I would bet that experience created more resiliency in people. And again, I think you can't create a tough guy. You can't make that, right? Tough guys are confident guys. So the one thing I learned over the years is yelling at people and telling them how worthless they are all the time. You know what? They start believing that after a while. So that's not the message. The message is, here's the standard. Here's what you're doing. Here's what we expect. And ultimately, we want to be able to get you there. And in the end, once a kid is confident, he's then tough too, right? Because confident people are tough. So I think that's one thing that I think I learned over the years that was really valuable, that just because you're going to work people hard doesn't mean you're trying to wear them out mentally. You're actually doing the opposite. You're trying to create a confident kid who has no chink in his armor, because you're going to get chinked playing the game. And anybody that's played that game, you're hurt. Something's hurting all the time. It's your elbow, it's your knee, it's your shoulder, it's your neck. There's something always on. And that's, if there's anything, I have a tremendous appreciation for the players. Bernie, I know how much pain you played with. I know what you were dealing with. For the guys that laid it out there, no matter what, I made a career off of that. I mean, I made a living from that, technically, for guys doing that. And again, if there's anything that I'm grateful for or appreciate, is the sacrifice, and the guys that listen, and the guys that worked and really bought into everything. Because I don't know, I think there's only 3 Rose Bowl wins yet up to this day, and I was at all 3 of them. So there might have been something to it. So
talk about that.
How do you make that mental shift from running YMCAs to, training high caliber NCAA athletes? Because, as much as you're dealing with Enron executives or general managing YMCAs, that is not being at the gym with these, large sweaty men at 4:35 in the morning every day. I imagine that's a very different pace of life and mindset you have to sort of get used to.
It's not, there's no comparison to it, really. I mean, the reality of it is I had to adapt just like the players did. You got to remember, they're coming into their 17, 18-year-old kids. They're not well-versed at what's going on either. So I had the advantage of being able to figure it out for myself. There was really a lot of good players on that first team that we talked about, that 1 in 10. Troy Vincent was on that team. The guy played in the NFL for 16 years. He's one of the best football players I think I've ever had a chance to be around. He was on that 1 in 10 team, right? So from that perspective, I look back at it and say, I learned from those guys. I spent a lot of time talking to those guys and trying to figure out what they felt. Because, again, they had a bad experience there. Right? They're seniors. A lot of these guys, they haven't won any games. Things aren't good. They couldn't wear their Letterman's jacket out. They couldn't do it. It was a hockey school all the way. And the reality of it, if you were a football player, you didn't walk around with the Letterman's jacket on. That's the group that we met. Right? But you know what? I think in the end, all that stuff changed. Obviously, with Barry's leadership and what he did, and programmatically, everything that he did, the kids reacted to. And I think when there was buy-in, it was measurable. And once you could see your success, then once these kids get it, hey, wait a minute, this works. We can win. This is kind of fun. We'll do this. We'll kick our ass every once in a while. That's okay. But we'll get some wins under our belt. But I think ultimately that his whole mentality when he came in was based on outworking everybody. That his attitude, that was everything he talked about. We're going to outwork everybody. And again, to me, I think there was a lot of truth in that.
So JD, so how did you build up to this new program? Like, I remember getting there. I had a video sent to my house with people doing the Olympic lifts. I had a card that you sent me that had everything I was going to do. How do you get from 1990 to when I showed up in 01 with this? How did you build that program? Like, what were the steps you took?
It's everything's an evolution, right? You're going to take the progression of building that program was everything that I learned. I think one of the things that I did early on that was really smart is I flew down to Dallas and got to be friends with Mike Wysick, who was the strength coach of the Cowboys. And that was right when Jimmy Johnson had started his mix there. And I got to be friends with him. And I went down there a couple of years in a row, but I would watch everything he was doing. And so the program built by watching other people who were succeeding and taking stuff and saying, hey, you know, I saw Troy Aikman do this. Hey, we should do this. You know, it was kind of one of those, a collective version. And I think the best measuring stick we've always had. And the thing I think at the end that I probably still miss doing is that combine training piece. Because what combine training really amounted to your ability to just control all the variables and evaluate whether it really works or not. And I think we had at least 15 guys run 4.2. You know what it takes to run 4.2 on pro day? I mean, 4.2 is flying. I mean, that don't happen very often. And when we would take that effort, you could, every trial and error, everything you believed in, everything you thought, if you were going to get a result from it, you could use that 8 weeks and confirm it. And I don't remember a time when our kids tested poorly on pro day. I don't remember that. So I'll stand on that.
So JD, let's jump back to 2001 and a young Matt Bernstein and Antosh Hawthorne, not Brandon Williams, Scott Starks, Brett Bell, young Kleber, Jake Wood, these dudes, Rob Brooks, like these guys show up. What does JD think of like each class when they come in?
God, you just named us a name, man. Scotty Starks, best tips I've ever seen. Jake Wood, he's Mr. CEO. What is he doing? What is that called again?
Well, he's got a couple companies now. He's got Team Rubicon, and then
Rubicon, that's it.
Yeah, and then he's got the other one that's like VC funding for some
Dontez Sanders. I can't miss some guys. I don't get in trouble here.
Yes. Oh my God. So, you know, I'll start laughing. Sorry. You know what? Every group's that's the fun part though, because every group you get to find out right away what they are, and you know that immediately. The first week of the summer, you know what you got, and then it's really about personalities. And I think some of the guys you named off are just really good people too. I mean, so ideally, you don't judge the person based on their physicality. It's more about, do they have the fit? Can they play? Will they be a good match for us? And again, you know this, we weren't going to throw the ball all over the place. We're going to run it right at you. And you got to have a certain person to play that. You were obviously that person to play that. That's a mentality thing. So for me, meeting all those kids, I literally, you named that list off. I'm trying not to laugh, but in a really good, positive way. Because Dontez Sanders, try to recreate that personality somewhere.
You can't. You can't recreate Dontez. Of all the people, you cannot recreate Tez.
He had 48 F-bombs on this show. 48 F-bombs.
So Scotty Starks, so I would stretch him, for the games. We would always do a little routine. He'd have me stretch him. He'd come
all 144 pounds of him.
And his hips were loose. He had the best hips on the planet. So I'll never forget kind of taking his knee and rolling it over, and I'm bored to death because I'm not really stretching. I'm just moving his body around. We're going. I'm like, why am I doing this? It's a waste of time. But it was his mental preparation. So he had to stretch so he believed he was ready. I'm like, dude, I'm not stretching anything. Your hips are amazing.
I can't forget. Cannot not mention Greg Root. Also, we had an interesting group of fullbacks for a long. Interesting group of running backs with AD Calhoun. I mean, you talk about personalities. There's some really good personalities those 5 years. God, it must have just been a lot of fun to also be around.
God, if that guy had any wiggle at all, he was a straight line. Boy, could he go though. He was a dangerous dude. If he got into secondary, look out. He is gone. But he had no wiggle.
Not a lot of wiggle. But he was I thought he was fantastic. Wait, so JD, I gotta say, so my freshman year, you always started on one side of the platform. Everyone got down there, and the people who could work out, you started moving them up towards the I don't know, the guys who can lift.
Right.
Was it fun to get like dudes down there? Like I remember going down with like Jake Sprague, some of these like meatheads, Dan Benning. Then I became one of the meatheads.
Right,
But what's it like to see like the evolution of somebody like Antosh, never lifted a weight in his life, came to you, and all of a sudden he's one of those platforms away. So that must be kind of awesome to see.
That's the fun of the job, is to be able to take guys through that and have them be able to do stuff they didn't think they could do.
Hold on, I have to interject really quick for listeners who don't know what you mean by the platforms, Bernie.
It's like the Olympic lift platforms that you see, like guys who go to the Olympics, like they lift on. So when we probably had 8 platforms, and on all the way down by JD's office was where the heavies, like the heavyweight guys who were going to throw the big weights around. JD always watched you too. So he had the first 2. I think Bot might have had the next 2, Herb's the next 2, and then some of the other guys had some of the younger, smaller weights. I don't want to be rude to people, but dude, that was another thing though. JD watched every single thing I did for 4.5 years on those platforms, and if you didn't do it well, you could, like, a check mark on your card. I felt bad when I got a check mark from JD. I was like, man, this is a bad day. And a check mark wasn't, right, JD? It's not like a terrible thing.
It's a no comment. You did it. Right. It's you know what? You're good for today, but don't come back in tomorrow like this. That's basically
plus 25, because JD had an algorithm that threw all these numbers into it, and then it came out what you would lift next time. JD, so my favorite
of 1 rounds, yeah.
Yeah. So I remember getting like plus 20s on bench when the last rep, you're like, I got to do this next week. But you had that mental, like, dude, I got to do this next week. There are no check marks. And if you got a minus, you should just go home.
We never put anything on there we didn't think you could do.
No, and you know what? You're right. I did it.
Set up to fail. It was a system set up to succeed. If I
did
wrote
it
on
every time.
Next week plus 10, then I knew you could do plus 10, or I wouldn't have put it on there.
So JD, one of my favorite stories is we sadly didn't go to a bowl game when I redshirted. So we didn't go to a bowl game. And everyone would, so the platforms, there was only 8 to 10. So you had 8 to 10 guys, and a lift group that probably had like 30 dudes in it. Everyone's sitting down on a ball, on like one of those big rollout balls on the pull down machines. JD, you walked in and you were very, very dismayed by the look of guys just sitting around after not going to a bowl game. Granted, it's December and we're in finals week. Do you remember that, JD?
I remember it distinctly, actually. Yes. And no, I was not happy at all, actually.
From what I remember, you said you stopped short. And I looked and I go, oh man, we're all in deep trouble now. And then you weren't allowed to sit down for the entire offseason.
You know what?
You basically said, like, everyone get up. You cannot, we didn't go to a bowl game. No one can sit down. That was the same thing here with the yawning, which is my favorite thing of all time.
Yeah. You know what? I see Ben Herbert, like, he's strength coach at Michigan, or was. He's at Chargers now. One of the first things I hadn't seen Ben in a long time. I see him in Houston go down to the game. First thing he brings up, he goes, my son, Charlie, he can get down and give me 25 pretty damn good ones. He's like, I'm going, dude, oh God, we're in trouble. It's awesome. You know what? But right away, if his son yawns, his son's doing 25. And I'm like, oh no, my God. He's still doing it to his kid now. But you know what? Another thing, I don't know. The yawning, look at it from my perspective. You're hoisting all this iron, and you got some guy, he's getting ready to get up under 500, 600 pounds. He's going to squat it. And he looks over at the corner of his eye and sees some dude over there cracking out a big yawn right before he gets under the rack. You're going to kill the dude. So I said, you know what? Enough's enough. You freaking yawn in this room, you're going to give me 25 push-ups. And then everybody tried to choke him back. You know, they'd sit there. I'm sure some guys are practicing how not to yawn, right? But I caught 99% of them anyway. But sometimes I'd just go up and say, that's a nice try, but got 25. It's good. Nice try.
I would say that I didn't come late to anything, and I hardly yawned, I think, ever. Even on campus, I was scared to do it. Actually, JD, now, so what's funny about the time thing, but when people yawn, I go to workouts, and people yawn in the workouts, I'm like, whoa, that's 25. I'm 41 years old thinking that stuff too.
You know what? My life is fulfilled now. I've accomplished my main goal. That was it.
Wait,
Right?
so JD, you mentioned people throwing on like 600 pounds. What was it like to watch Chris Presley break Aaron Gibson's squat record?
Aaron Gibson could split jerk 315 like he had a candy bar in his hand. I mean, you know what a split jerk is. That's an overhead. Mm-hmm. I mean, that's a freaking 315. I mean, yeah, no, he was free. There's times I sit back and I do start to laugh. Some of these guys were just freaks. Presley, pound for pound, strongest human being I've ever been around. I mean, I always thought myself, damn, I hope he never punches anybody. If he punches somebody, he's gonna kill him. Because he's one of those, he had so much power. And he was strong and powerful. His combination was raw. But that man, that day, I still have that YouTube thing on my laptop right now. If I didn't have the blurry screen, I'd play it for you. But no, I still have Presley's squat thing that they put on YouTube. I still have it on my laptop.
I watch it 3 or 4 times a year just to see like we didn't film that, or I don't have any of that on, YouTube or any social media. So we didn't film a lot of the lifts, or we did, but we don't have it.
I can tell you exactly how it happened. There was a kid working in the video department. He was a new kid. He was an intern. I don't remember him. I don't remember his name, but he was a young kid. He knew what YouTube was.
Yeah,
I had never even heard of it. So he comes down there, and we would have him film some of the lifts so that we could, evaluate that stuff. And he filmed that. And he was sitting at the supervisor's desk that we used to have sitting there. He was sitting there, and I watched him film it. I didn't know nothing about it. And he said something to me about putting it on YouTube. And I'm like, I don't even know what YouTube is on. Whatever. So that, we're doing other stuff. That thing, that made a lot of people have seen that. And a lot of people, like 620, 9 times. And remember when he did it, this was after spring ball ended. So this is not a guy that is fresh as a daisy in the middle of the summer. He did that in March and April, right after spring football ended. So that dude had been playing football for a month, then jumped. But what were we testing out at that time? We were trying to figure out our strength cycles in season and what we could get away with. So I was experimenting with stuff. And I said, you know what? I want to test these guys when spring ball's over, because I think we're pretty freaking strong right now. And so what would you do then? You would take that information, go to the in-season, and then try to figure ways to, work that into what you were doing. Obviously, you can't go full scale because spring ball and the in-season are different, but you can get away with some stuff. And that's the one thing I remember that last Rose Bowl we were at, we were lifting in a hotel room in Pasadena, and I had numerous guys PRing, getting their best. Wow. And again, in that time of year, in January, in a hotel, that told me that those things worked, right? So if strength programs are great, but they only matter if they carry on to the field somehow. They got to show up.
Jay, you mentioned a hotel. The opposite of a hotel was camp at the seminary.
Oh, God.
What was the buildup? I mean, it cracks me up to even think about this today. But you guys brought out there hundreds of weights, benches.
Stupid. I think we did it initially. I remember the first year we went out there. I think we literally brought half of the McLean weight room out there. Way more than we've ever did before. We had so much crap out there. I was like, and we used none of it. We brought neck machines out there. Remember, who uses a neck machine during football practice? I mean, your neck's beat the crap. You're not going to get it. Come on. So, but every year, believe it or not, we tried to scale it down. But that was a big move. The managers hated that Football managers hated that. The weight room move. Yeah.
I don't think that we loved it either. But JD, there is nothing like watching the defense have to go and jog up the hill to get their workout in quick when you could just not do that. It was amazing. But then you knew the next day was your day.
Your day was coming.
Your day was coming. Oh man. Wait, JD, I have one more funny story to ask you about. After summer Fridays was probably one of the hardest we've ever done. We would do a lake circuit and then go up, put the vests on, and do stations. And somehow you caught wind that guys were going into the parking lot and at like 10, 11, 12 o'clock, chugging a couple beers. And you were very upset that their recovery was maybe some adult beverages. I don't know if they were 18 to 21, whatever. It doesn't matter. But do you remember that?
I remember having some conversations with some people that thought that was detrimental to their future. Yeah, I do actually. And here's the thing. Here's even the better part of that. What I remember sitting down with Joe Thomas, and he would be, when he was a senior, he's kind of my go-to because I didn't want to kill Joe. Joe was too good. Don't kill Joe. So I would always go to Joe and say, "What do you think? You want to make a deal with the devil? What do you know?" And then I would always. He would say, "Well, we're going to have a party after, blah, blah, blah." And I would always say, "Okay, who are you inviting?" In other words, don't leave anybody out. Don't go and have a party and then segregate it away from a group over here and a group over here, a group over there. You guys are going to go do that? Make sure you do it together. So in my message, I was okay with that as long as it had some sort of a benefit. Chugging beers in the parking lot has no benefit at all.
That was one of the more mad I've seen you, and the most mad I've ever seen you outside of not going to the bowl game. We took Tony Pisciotti out for his 21st birthday.
Oh,
and he had the 6 a.m. lift, and we were all in that lift with him. And you were like, "Tony, don't you ever show up here again like this. Get the hell out of here." And
I remember that very well. How's Tony doing, by the way? Is he all right?
He's good. He's a state trooper in Pennsylvania. So if you ever get in any trouble, you're good.
He'd be a great state trooper.
He would be a great state trooper.
Freaking awesome.
Oh, man, that
great guy though. Yeah, I do remember. I was not a big Tony Pisciotti fan at that point. No,
we really put a hurting on him for his 21st. It was I felt
you know what? I love it. You know what? And to all showed up and did the work. He showed up and did the work.
He showed up. He did not do well in that.
You know what? Just showing up and being there and showing that it matters to you, I can deal with that. That I could deal with.
No, I completely agree. So JD, I know we don't have a ton of time. I wanted to go talk to you more, like a little bit about Bot and Herbs, because they've gone on to do some amazing things in strength and conditioning. I mean, Herbert's a national, Ben's a national champion with Michigan. Brian Bott has started, I think, 6 or 7 gyms in Wisconsin.
He's got a bunch of facility stuff that he's running. Yeah, it sounds like he's doing really well.
He's doing really well. So, and he's got, Joe Thomas and Groy and a bunch of other guys are investors and they work out there, and Alex Ingold comes back and they're all there. What's it like to kind of be like the mentors of some of these guys who are really all still changing youth?
You know what? I can tell you, going down to Michigan, going to that game was it was an incredibly rewarding experience because it's, there was a little bit of a father-son thing going on there in a roundabout way with Ben. I'll never forget, I was sitting watching the game when they beat Alabama, and I was like, dang, I should go. And then I'm like, my wife's like, you should go. And I'm like, well, don't ask if you're not really going to go. Because buying tickets, flying to Houston, don't go to Ben. Hey, and then I changed my mind. I'm not coming. I was just kidding. So I had to sit there and ponder it for a couple of days. And then my wife, because she knows me really well, she goes, the only chance you got to see in that game and being awake is if you're there, because you'll be sleeping at 8 o'clock. Then I go, she knows me really well. So I got on phone, booked a flight, got a hold of Ben. He was excited. It was, we sat and talked shop. 2 days before the game. And it was, the little bit that he carried over, and he, obviously the foundation, he was incredibly grateful. I couldn't count the number of times that he was appreciative about the experience he had. But I was incredibly blown away with the magnitude of where he had taken it, the complexity of what he had done. Ben was always great. He's a smart guy, right? So he's great with documents. He was great with data. He was great with pulling stuff together. The way he put stuff together, he sat down with me and showed me what he was doing with each guy and kind of showed me his protocols. And some of it was carryover from what we did, right? But a lot of it was really, the guy had a listening score for these guys. He had an availability score for them. So, and think about this. Two biggest things that are important in football. Are you available? Who cares if you're the best player on the team, but you're hurt all the time? When we need you, you're not around. Okay? And do you listen? Every NFL scout that comes in and visits with those guys dials in on the listening score. Because is this guy coachable? You sit and talk to him a million times. Is he digesting any of this? Does it show up in his game or in his lifestyle or in his schoolwork? Does it show up somewhere? Ben had a score for these guys. So basically it had nothing to do with their athleticism or their contribution to the team. Do you listen or not? I thought that was really cool. And how he had it dialed in. I saw Ben Herbert on the field in that game. I thought by the end of the second quarter, Washington was in trouble and they knew it. And I felt the whole time that the quarterback seemed like a flick of the wrist guy. He just was like, I think they were in his head. That's just my read. I don't know. I'm some joker sitting in the stands drinking a beer. But I would say that I saw Ben's work in that game, and there was nobody prouder and happier than to be there when he won that game, which was really cool.
Well, I think, Bern, that's a perfect place for us to wrap up for the day here. I've got a million
like 1,000 other questions, but yes, we can wrap up.
No, my dream is to have JD, Bot, and Herbs all together on one show.
That'd be cool.
I think that
would be fun to have JD, Greg Root, and Anthony Davis together. Wait, JD, I got to ask one more time. Thing. When did you create the dynamic lap?
Whew, that's a great question. And you know what's weird? This stuff shows up in all the programs do this crap now. It's just really kind of bizarre. It was a combination of a couple of things. I had a guy on my staff, Robert Hackett was a track guy. So if you watch sprinters and jumpers warm up, there's a series of movements that they do in that's preparatory, but most of it's straight line, right? They're not doing lateral movements. They're not doing lateral shuffles. We used to do those low walks and all that stuff. Mm-hmm. So conceptually, it was just a sprinter, jumper, track warm up modified for a football player. And then we just turned it into it. And that dynamic warm was pretty tough. I'll never forget.
It was brutal.
That Danny Kaye, never forget. First stage there, freshman, offensive lineman. We go up, we do the dynamic lap. That's the warm up. We're not even 30 seconds into this thing. Well, the lap lasts maybe 3 minutes, but we have not started. He thinks it's the workout. He's laying on the ground. I go, what the hell are you doing? He thought the workout was over. Dude, we hadn't even started yet. We just did the warm-up lap. And I'm like, oh my God, this is going to be interesting. But you know what? In the end, then those guys grow into it. But that shock grabs everybody. Grabbed a lot of guys. But
JD, we still talk about you, the dynamic lab, and pretty much everything strength and conditioning all the time, not just on the podcast, but like in my regular life. Sometimes we'll just be doing something, or we'll just be like, man, JD. And you just pop up everywhere, man. I absolutely adored playing for you, being coached by you. I definitely think that where I came in, I was raw in a lot of ways. And you built me into this tank that could take a beating and better give it out. So I always appreciate it. I also stayed on your good side. So I also appreciate
the
it.
Hebrew Hammer shall live on forever. Hey, I have to say this, but my daughter goes to Minnesota. Her boyfriend's name is Nate. New York Nate, one of their friends, he knows you.
Whoa.
So I go to meet these guys. Yeah, Nate Rosenzweig, Horace Greeley High School.
I know the name. Yes.
Okay, he met with you. So I had to bring him here. Is this so funny? Because, of course, I'm going up there for Parents Weekend. The first time I'm up there, this is a couple years ago. And I get introduced to New York Nate because my daughter's boyfriend's name is Nate. And I'm going, New York Nate, cool. Okay, we're talking, and their parents are there. And all of a sudden, Matt Bernstein comes up. The next thing you know, it's Matt, you know Matt. Yeah, I know Matt Bernstein. His parents gave me the outfit that my daughter's first pictures were taken in. So then we pulled out the picture of my daughter, her first baby pictures, and your parents. By the way, how are they?
They're great. They loved you from the beginning. Awesome. They met you day one. Matt Perkins. They would give. First off, it's probably to my betterment. They would give JD like Christmas gifts. And it worked out really well for me to stay on JD's good side. Although I'm not saying it was a bribe. They just loved him. They loved you and Doug Teed. Like
they were great. You know what? They were the best. That picture to this day is still awesome. And it's literally the outfit my daughter's first baby pictures were taken and came from your parents.
That's so cool. I'll tell them because I told them we were interviewing you yesterday, and my dad was so excited.
That's awesome. Very cool. You know what you need to do is get Lee Evans on here sometime, and we have to tell Lee Evans the trip to Houston, the needling trip to Houston. I'll just leave it at that. There's a lot of rules, bro.
I'm in.
But just so you know, I don't care.
Oh my God, we don't have enough time. JD, the getting the creatine at that GNC like by the Westtown Mall. And it was only legal because it was in the student paper that said like you get 75% off. These things are so funny, and we like talk about this all day long. But it was to the entire community. Anyone with a second ID could get 85% off. You had to do it because this is their shoebox, and they said you can't do anything.
None of these rules exist now. None of them.
Nothing.
Can you imagine being
head
strength coach at the University of Wisconsin? I got to drive down to the GMC, walk in there and negotiate a deal with them and say, hey, here, I need my guys doing this stuff. It's illegal for them to get it. And if they can't get it for anything less than a normal student to pay for it, but they don't have any money. So how are we going to get this stuff to them? And the next thing he goes, oh, here's what we'll do. We'll discount it. And then I said, you've got to discount it for every person here. He goes, and I'll do that. And they did it for us. But and then imagine all the rules we live by. None of them exist now.
Not one.
Zero. They're all gone. So
it's amazing.
That rule book was this thick, and it got thicker every year. I'm just curious as to how thick it is now. Is it like paper thin now, or what?
It's just one rule. There are no rules. It's like Fight Club. You don't talk about it, and there are no rules.
If you've got a bunch of money, you're in good shape. That's the rule.
That's the rule. JD, thank you so much for being here, man. This is such a treat.
It's awesome. No, and I love you. You know that, man. I appreciate you. Always will. So, this was great. I enjoyed it.
Perfect. Well, we'll definitely have to have you back.
All right.
Thank you so much for joining us here today. And thank you so much, everyone, for tuning in to Believe in Badgers on the Believe Network, presented by betonline.ag and Oak Ridge Wealth Management. And until next time, on Wisconsin.
On Wisconsin.